I'm just gonna read where we're at now. Um, 8. I'm just gonna-
Okay, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the May 3rd special board meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we will have our purpose statement. Director Perez, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. And our agenda item is our closed session. I will entertain a motion.
I move the board hold a closed session as provided in 21.5 IC to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Linkaitis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we will move into closed session and we will return for any members of our public to this Zoom meeting following that closed session. Are you not in as a panelist? You're not in, no one else is in as a panelist.
Normally my teachers.
Are we good? Okay.
Recognize them, but just find out who they are.
All right, everybody,
Oh, I know, it's hard.
we are ready. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Perez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0, and we will reconvene for our regular meeting at 6:30 PM. I would log out for sure. Should I go back in? I wonder, oh, that's Eric, I mean, I wonder if I should have my camera on.
calendar.
Yeah, sorry, so people, he said have the camera off and but the people could see me when I was talking. That's a good idea. Just to get it. Just to get it.
It's good to see you all.
Good evening and welcome to the May 3rd board meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Franzen, seconded by Colton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I apologize for putting you on the spot, but Director Franzen, would you read our purpose statement?
Be more than happy to. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. And our first item on our agenda is recognitions and celebrations. School Board Recognition Month.
So I wanted to just thank you all for the commitment and the dedication to our district. Being a school board member is difficult anytime, but then in light of COVID and the difficult decisions that you all have had to make, you've done a great job. And so I think the community definitely is proud of their board and should be. So you each have a certificate at your place at your station and a few other little goodies from the district. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our COVID-19 update, and I will turn it over to Dr. Arnold.
Yep, I am ready. Okay, here is the update on COVID status in our building and our local in-school metrics. The first slide shows the COVID positives and quarantines in our school. Today, there are 3 students positive for COVID-19 and 4 quarantining due to being identified as close contacts. We continue to see student positives as a result primarily of household exposure and overall low numbers in student positives and quarantines. We currently have 0 staff positive for COVID-19 or quarantining due to close contact and 1 pending a test result. The graph below show the rates of COVID-19 among staff and students. And again, continuing to see low activity in staff and have returned to lower numbers in students following that increase we saw after spring break. Our next slide shows the Story County metrics. Our Story County 14-day average new daily case rate is 14.2. Over the past week, our case rate has stayed in around the 13 to 14 range. And you can see this detailed on the graph on the left as well as on our trend throughout the year. Our 14-day positivity is 5.6 and our 7-day positivity is 6.8. This represents a slight increase in positivity since our last meeting, and some of this can be attributed to a decrease in testing, but also there were a few more cases last week than there were the previous week. Over the past 7 days, 73% of the positive cases are in those 18 to 29 years old, and 3% of the cases are in people under 18 years old. Our next slide shows our school absence metrics. Today's 5-day average student and staff absence rates are shown on the table. On the top, we continue to stay well below our 10% absence rate for that 5-day average and continue to be fairly consistent in student and staff absences, as you can see by the graph below. No big peaks or anything there. Our final slide includes an update on vaccinations. We will be hosting a student, parent, family vaccine clinic on Wednesday. Story County Public Health is going to be using Pfizer and administering the vaccine to those 16 years and older. We currently have about 80 students and parents register. People can contact me for the link to register for through the Sign Up Genius. We still do have spots available. And just some other upcoming vaccination notices. It appears the FDA will approve Pfizer to be administered to the 12 to 15-year-old age group sometime either later this week or early next week, depending on which news source you find that in. At this time, I don't know if we'll be offering any additional clinics for those younger age group once those approvals are released. It's kind of going to be dependent on Story County Public Health for that. Additionally, we do not plan to change our mask requirement for students or staff. We will continue to follow CDC's guidance that advises masks as an essential piece in layered mitigation. CDC recommends that masks should be worn by students and staff while in school, and also keeps us in compliance with the Ames and Story County mask mandates. And for the local update on vaccinations, 32.5% of Story County residents are considered fully vaccinated. And if you exclude those under 18 years old, 38.7% of Story County population is fully vaccinated. And I threw the number on there just because it was really kind of nice. 88.9% of those 65 or older are vaccinated, which is really the population we're happy to see with that high of a level. So that ends my update. Is there any questions that I can answer?
Do you have the numbers on 18 years and older that are partially vaccinated?
It's not clear that I've been getting these numbers through the CDC. The Iowa reporting of that makes it unclear based on if it's by the residents, the county residents versus the county of administration, and you can see it. You can see the partial by county of administration, not by residents. So I can look it up, but it doesn't seem to be as clear of a number. But I would guess, it's probably, I would hope around 50%. The only negative that we have is with a large percentage of our population being in that college age, we're still kind of waiting for Iowa State to catch up with the Johnson & Johnson pause and getting them vaccinated.
Yeah, and they would be partially vaccinated. That's why I was wondering.
Right.
So we probably have a more significant number of people that have started. So thank you.
All right, we will move on. And CDC mask guidance update, which is Dr. Arnold again.
She covered that.
Included in the original
Okay.
presentation, just that
I
we
didn't know
are,
if you had anything else to add.
no, just we're going to
Okay.
continue with them. They're still recommended, and so that's going to be where we're going to stick with that for now.
Perfect, thank you. All right, moving on to our discussion items. Board committee update. We don't have any specifically listed because there weren't any that met, but are there any board committees that have an update to provide?
I was going to provide an update. SIAC is actually under our responsibilities for board committee
That's
update. We had a meeting on April 26th that Dr. Hawkins led with community and staff members. So I thank everybody that participated. It was a really great meeting. They reviewed the academic data, some bullying data, and some panorama survey data. I would expect that information will probably be coming out to the whole board. The academic data was especially sobering. I was in a group that was looking at the elementary school reading benchmarks. And normally, for example, you would target 80% as the benchmark. Our preschoolers at the winter testing, so that would be February, only 45% of them met benchmark. And then the other thing that was both shocking and surprising, but it's a thing we need to start looking at, is if you looked at the benchmarks for students in some of the different groups, the white students between the fall testing and the winter testing went down by about 1.2% as far as how many met benchmark. Hispanic and Latino students went down by nearly 10%. Black students, it went down by 13.5%. How many met benchmark? Free and reduced lunch went down by 15%. And homeless students went down by almost 35%. How many met benchmark between fall and February? So in that core time that it was remote learning, and yeah, that was very sobering. I know President Shields Cook was also there and looked at some of that data. It was, yeah, something we need to look at more.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Beerbaum, for sharing.
Did you look at it across the state in comparison?
Is this picking up?
Not much. Try it again.
The state
That's-
provides, okay, just need to hold it closer, sorry. The state provides data holistically around each grade level as far as the percentage tested and the percentage of students proficient, but the state does not break the data down in the way Director Beerbaum was just doing so for the board.
Yeah, I was
At least
curious-
not that I'm aware of or that I could find in the report.
I was curious, the other UEN districts, what, if that had come up in any of your meetings, Christy or Jeff, some of the other scores. I know it did come up with superintendents.
It-
So,
It came up with similar concerns. We didn't talk specifically about the numbers in each category, but overall, those same categories were conversations we were having at our UEN meeting as well. And we have a curriculum network meeting coming up. I'll be surprised if that's not part of the conversation there too.
great, thank you.
I want to provide the board with an update from teaching and learning. Because of our last board meeting, the remote learning was, it was a good discussion. Lots of questions came up. I thought, as a co-chair of the teaching and learning, I thought it would be appropriate for us to revisit it and perhaps get some of those answers and get an update of where we are now that the task force has met. And so we thought that that would be a good idea, unless the board would like it back to the, well, I suppose we would have it back to the board table no matter what. So May 12th, we're hoping to meet and discuss that subject again.
Thank you, Director Colton. Other committee updates?
So will that data that you talked about at SIAC, is that something that will be brought to the entire board then? The reading data? Okay, at some point.
Do you want to report out on that at the next meeting? Just like you did at the SIAC? We could just do he could go over
Okay.
the data
Thank you.
like we did at SIAC.
That's actually a thought that I had when you were giving your update is that, what's given everything that's transpired in the past few months since February, a lot of people were asking, what is all this? What is this equity stuff you're talking about? And who asked for this? And why do we need this? Right. I feel like there are pockets of the community who really just haven't been able to keep up with the conversation around equity, especially around the numbers. And SIAC is just a fabulous place for people in the community to be able to connect. And I know that not everybody in the community can serve on SIAC, but it used to be that the meetings would still be open to the public. And I don't know if you plan to meet in public or if maybe that's something that you could start posting so that people could tune in, because I think people are really looking to the equity committee, but really the work that I think is generating a lot of this is coming out of SIAC. And I don't know if people really even know what SIAC is or whatever. And so I would just encourage you to think about how can we get this information to the community? Because I think it actually helps explain a lot of what's really going on in the district and explains the reasons for why we're doing a lot of what we're doing.
I would think, and Dr. Hawkins, you can comment on this. If you're coming back in a couple of weeks to talk about it, the discussion we had, first of all, about why we only had one meeting this year because of the virtual, but I think it was interesting, the outcome being where you asked the SIAC group what topics could be taken up in the future. I think a discussion we could have at the board is what those topics are and see if the board has any other ones that we think might be relevant. And also there was a discussion that Dr. Hawkins had led into about what the meeting rhythm could be like next year. And I think we could put Director Binken's comment into that of maybe it's like a quarterly meeting that is more public, that almost has a little bit of the listen and learn type concept with it as well, and see if there's a way we can improve that. So it's not so much just here's some data, now talk about it, but maybe more of an interaction with the community members and the stakeholders. I think that would be great.
Yeah, certainly I would say last year's structure was built around 4 to 5 meetings that would have happened throughout the year. Of course, those meetings were cut short for the same reason we're all spread out today. But the intent is to return to that structure. I appreciate the conversation. I will say, Director Benkin, my typical practice has been that SIAC is not like a board subcommittee or a public, but if this board, of course, desires for it to be a board subcommittee and be
I
dealt
think
with.
SIAC is by law public. So, but it was posted, so that wouldn't, but we didn't record it, so that next time we could record it.
It wouldn't have to
or-
be recorded, but
Well,
it is
or
a
allow
public
the
meeting.
But if we're not having public come in, we would want to record it or do it via Zoom.
Yeah, we can certainly choose to. I'm not aware of anything in the legislation that requires it to be public, but we could certainly make the choice for it to be a public meeting. And I'll lay out some of those similar talking points when I address the board in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting from my perspective to hear you lay out, if you could do it however you would like, that would have that type of engagement and the things we were just discussing, what would you propose? So it's less, if you come with a proposal of what you think would be great, then it doesn't have to be so prescriptive from us, hit and miss, but it could be, we could react to that proposal.
Probably, this is a good point to remind the board, as well as anybody that would be watching, there are required components that need to be addressed within SIAC as far as, for example, review of academic data and discussion of goals, review of bullying data. So there's a list of things that are required in code, but certainly, and that's the idea of expanding it to more than one meeting in a more typical year, is that it would afford us the time to address some of those other topics. But yeah, I'll bring all that forward, and we certainly can make the meeting run for the public however we want to. So
Great, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. Anything else under board committee updates? And do we have any comments from the public on our board committee updates? And if you do, you can raise your hand in the Zoom meeting and we will give you permission to speak. And I do not see any hands raised, so we will move on to our summer school overview. And Christy Mixdorf.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this. I get the privilege to share with you many hours of work from educators and directors and some of our community partners with what we are planning for this year's summer school. Our purpose is very similar to what it has been in the past, where it's focused in on the literacy and math skills for students, and as well as in our secondary system credit recovery. And I will lay out both our K-8 programming and our 9-12 programming as I walk through this. Summer school is tuition free. It's invitation based. Transportation and meals are provided throughout the summer school program. I'm going to start with our K-8 programming. We're offering an on-site program similar to what we've done in the past. It's a 4-day program. It will run Monday through Thursday. We will start right away June 14th, and we will run the program all the way through July 22nd for students. The morning session is focused primarily on academics, and students can choose to just participate in that morning session. Or students can choose to stay all day. Our afternoon will be application of those skills and strategies in more of a project-based environment and supported by our community partners in United Way and YSS. New this year for our summer school programming is a virtual opportunity. So if students are not able to or interested in participating on site, we'll have a virtual opportunity or option that runs 45 minutes a day for students. That virtual option will be in small groups of 1 to 5. It will run through the same dates, that June 14th through July 22nd, and it will be scheduled through the classroom teacher, the assigned teacher. Our on-site program will take place at Meeker, and our virtual program obviously will be virtual and devices will be provided. Another new component for summer school programming this year is for our K-2 students. We currently throughout the year engage in AmeriCorps tutoring, and United Way has extended that for us. So we are able to offer one-on-one tutoring for some of our kindergarten through second grade students. The focus of this programming will be primarily literacy, and those sessions will be one-on-one, and they'll be about 20 to 30 minutes a day for students. This option is also virtual, and devices will be provided. Another new component for us, or one that we are strengthening the support, is our EL programming for students. We have looked at that in our criteria for coming to summer school. And Shaylee is going to share just a little bit about what her and her team have put together in terms of support for ESL.
Thank you. So the EL team has been involved, as in past years, to help determine which English learners are invited to participate in summer school this summer. And one thing that's a little different this year is that we've kind of rethought how to provide supports. And so we have, within the structures that are set up, talked about some flexible options to best meet the needs of the students. And so our EL teachers, we're expecting to have several who will be teaching. And so they will tailor supports based on student need, using some of the resources that we have, such as leveled and topic books, listed a few topics, things like animals, biographies, and countries. We also have textbooks that are designed for English learners at different grade levels, and that's the spotlight on English. And then writing is always a large area of focus. And so things like the weekend journals, and also focus on other genres such as informational, opinion, and narrative. And then finally, we also have Imagine Learning. We have the literacy component, as well as for older students, math. And so that's another option that students will be able to use during summer school.
Just a quick question about that, the EL, since it's on the K through 8, are older high school students invited as well for that program?
So for the K for 8, that's how that one's set up. But at the high school, I think there will be some English learners that will be involved in the credit recovery that Director Mixdorf will speak more about.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, if you want to slide down to the second page, I'll do our overview of what our secondary summer school programming will look like. Similar to what we've done in the past in terms of focused on credit recovery, we really want to help students meet their graduation goals and meet them on time. And so a large portion of our summer school will be focused on that credit recovery. We'll continue to enroll students in this program throughout the rest of this year. So we don't have a deadline on this like we do in our other program. The high school will be set into 2 programs. So we'll have a 9th and a 10th grade section that will meet for the first 3 weeks of our summer school time. And what we're adding new for our 9th and 10th graders will be an instructional component. So students can come in and an hour of their summer school day will be with certified teachers working on instructional needs, executive functioning skills, time management, barriers that students feel that they have had in some of the challenges of programming this year, or that has been a challenge for them to meet their grade requirements there. And then for our 10th or our 12th and 11th and 12th graders, we will offer solely credit recovery. In both our 9th and 10th grade program and our 11th and 12th grade program, the credit recovery portion of this has options for students, so they can come on site. We'll have staff there that can support them, answer questions, and provide instruction if needed as they're working through their recovery program. Or if they feel like they can do this independently, they will have check-ins with teachers twice a week to make sure that they're staying on course to meet those goals, but they have some opportunities to have a more flexible entrance to that. We know our high school students have different commitments and things that they want to do for the summer. So we've tried to make it as flexible as possible at the high school. There will be facilitators, though, that will have a roster of students. So if students are participating in summer school and they are not meeting their timelines, somebody at the high school will be reaching out to them to help engage them. Are there any questions or comments that I can answer or take back to our team as we continue to put this program together?
My question is around the EL program for secondary. What would that look like? Will they be, so I hear that it's credit recovery, but will they be English? Will they be taught English?
So all that will be offered for the high school is how Director Mixdorf laid out the programming for 9, 10, and 11, 12. So the credit recovery, and they would have support from the teachers that are there. I don't believe there'll be any EL staff at the high school.
It's a great question, though, and one that I'll take back to the team and see if we want to think about that a little bit differently, and also really look at the students that will be on site and what their academic needs are, their support needs are, and things. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you, because I think it's important if we're seeing our students falling behind. I can only imagine that piece is particularly in high school. I think oftentimes we pay attention to the littles and we cut them, but we have high school students that come in, but their needs are different, right? They could be in 11th grade, but they are at 5th grade. So they need that intensity. And I'm thinking not to be using money that is not my money, but I think now that we have the ESSER funds, maybe we can create more intense programming that surrounds the EL credit recovery, intense English reading instruction. I think we can buff that program a little bit more.
We'll take a look at our enrollment and who's coming to summer school, and I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
I have a question related to enrollment. Last time you presented these data, I think you did have some enrollment numbers, and it was, I think kind of just getting going. And I wondered if you just had an update about the enrollment.
Yep, we have 213 students currently enrolled in the K-12 programming. We are still looking at enrollment increasing likely at the high school, just as grades are coming in, and as those needs are there, we really want to make sure we're helping students meet those graduation requirements in our high school system. Middle school sent out their invitations, and they are still wanting some extra time to just make some phone calls and make sure that families are as informed as we want them to be as emails come through. And so they're making some phone calls there. So we may see a little bit of an increase in enrollment at the middle school and high school. That's where we're a little lower in terms of our invitation versus interest, which from what I hear and understand, that's been somewhat traditional. There's a lot of competing commitments for students once you get into 6th grade and on up for what they want to do over the summer.
So especially at the elementary level, there's 213 out of how many invitations? I'm sorry, I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, so we sent a little over 300 invitations out at the elementary, and let me do a little math here. We have about 138 students at the elementary participating. Sorry, I put the numbers in K-8 instead of K-5. Our lowest ratio of participation is really at the middle school and the high school. We sent a little over 300 invitations out at the high school. And we have about 72 students right now at the high school, 74, sorry, that are currently participating or saying that they're interested in being on site.
You have space to welcome more students. And so if it becomes clear that the people you've extended the invitations to aren't willing to accept those invitations for whatever reason, would you consider opening those spots to other students who might be interested, or that just is not what your plan is?
Yeah. So at the high school and at the high school, we haven't really put a cap on it. If students need it, we'll figure out how to get them matched up to that. So we don't really have anybody kind of waiting that we didn't send an invitation out to. The K-8 is a little bit different because we're balancing that staffing. We sent out an additional 48 invitations to first graders once our first round of enrollment or invitations went through. We made some phone calls just to make sure that families were informed as they were making decisions for themselves over the summer. We sent out another 48. We got a good response there. Right now, we're pretty balanced with staff. We want to keep that ratio from 1 to 15 at the elementary. So we're keeping those class sizes small. As we finalize everything, we may have a few spots in like 5th grade. We might have 2 spots left, and we'll try to cap those out with invitations. And the team of educators that are meeting to make some of those decisions are aware of, okay, here would be our next step. Here would be our next step. Great question. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a question about the credit recovery at the high school. Is that, do they earn credits for specific classes that they may have failed? So like any class, they can earn a credit for that class within that 3-week period?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
What would you say are kind of the key roadblocks or challenges right now to doing this maybe as well as you would like to? It sounds like there's kind of 2. One is getting students to enroll, and then I would guess there's a staffing limit, as you said, too. Is there anything that
It's really been staffing where we've tried to really balance. I mean, we know we've asked a lot of our staff this year, and we think it's important that they have a chance to recharge and do what they feel like they need to do over the summer. We have very dedicated staff. So we have had several that have offered to participate. We opened up the job posting to outside of our Ames staffing, and I think we will hire three staff members to support the K-8 programming outside of Ames teachers. So it's really just been trying to balance those needs.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Then we will take any questions from our public. If you have questions on the summer school overview, just on that one topic at this point, please raise your hand and you will be given permission to speak. Okay, and I don't see any. So our next discussion item is our priority 3. And we put this on here. We will be having a work session around priority 3, which is our recruitment, retention, and professional development of high quality staff. I didn't say that exactly right. But I wanted to put it out to the board to see if folks would like to share what information they would like to hear or what exactly they would like to discuss during that work session.
I can go first. Something I would like, and I had sent this on to you, but if we could look at some of the data around number of resignations, retirements for the past 5 years. I think looking at it by year and by building would be helpful.
Thank you. What other info would folks like?
Well, I have some information I'd like to add, but I think I need to ask a question first. So I just like some clarity on what the purpose of this conversation is so that I can understand the goal of it.
The current one right here now?
Yeah, why will we be having a work session about this? What are we?
There was a request by a few board members to have a work session around the topic. And so the discussion tonight is just to understand what information folks are wanting to what information are we wanting the district staff to prepare in advance of that work session, and kind of help us understand how to structure that work session.
But I guess I don't know, like, I understand that. I guess I'm not understanding what brought us to this, what brought us to the feeling that we need to have a work session about priority 3, right? We have 5, and so why this one? And so I think that will help me figure out what information I would like to ask for. So I'm not understanding the purpose of the work session.
So I think it's been concerns that were brought about the numbers of resignations and retirements over the past couple of years, and just making sure we've had SMART goals in the past around professional development and around recruitment, but we haven't had one on retention. And so just kind of looking at where we're at with that, and what that might look like if we wanted to focus a little bit more on that.
Okay, so that helps me, because I guess what I'm wondering then, because I think the request was for the past 5 years, but I think we've only had the priority for like 3 years. And so I don't know what 5 years of data would tell us about a priority we've only had for 3 years. If that's what we're assessing. Are we assessing the success on the priority? Are we assessing where we are just in general? Like, I'm still not clear.
I requested 5 years just to understand a little bit more longitudinal data, not in terms of understanding that, yes, the priority is in its 3rd year, not trying to contradict that. I was just trying to understand a little bit more longitudinal data.
Because this spans two administrations, that are just very different. And I wonder if the data, like, how would we be reading the data? Are we reading post-Jenny, pre-Jenny? I don't know, what is it, BC, AD? Are we still using that? Like, how would we be reading it?
I mean, you could say that we'd be reading it pre-priority, post-priority in a way. But I think we'd want to have more data around that priority beyond just the ones we've talked about, in that the priority was set, was it 3.5 years ago? So to know how we're doing on the priority, we probably need to see a little bit of information about before it was a priority, I would think.
2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we're assessing the district and where the district is.
I didn't use the word assessing. I said I wanted to gain, when I made this request at the last meeting, I said I wanted to gain an understanding. So I don't think I would use the word assessing.
So we want to just gain an understanding about where the district is in the past 5 years on resignations and retirements. Is that right?
That is a piece that I would like to be considered as a part of it, is understanding how we're doing on this priority.
Okay, and so we're going to have a work session to gain an understanding about how the district is doing on a priority that we've had for 2.5 years using 5 years of data. That's what we're going to do.
Well, I think this was just one piece. So this is the purpose of the discussion. So that's not the only thing that we would look at. That was just one board member's request. We're looking at the work session is intended to focus on priority 3 overall.
And so that's helpful. Thank you. Because I think that's what I needed, because that was my addition, was the priority has 3 components to it. And so I wanted to be sure that we had all of those components reflected in the conversation. So I got to move the mic, even though they told me not to move the mic. So the priority measures recruitment, retention, and development. So it's an and, not an or. And so I would just ask that we could modify the request to look at all aspects of the priority for the same amount of time.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sorry for whoever's going to have to pull all that data, but thank you. That's a lot.
And I think, isn't the teacher leadership compensation system a part of our development of our staff? At least that's my understanding of that program anyway. So I don't know if that would be an opportunity to better understand that.
Yeah, I think that fits because that also fits with the development of high quality staff,
Mhm.
right? So I think it fits, and I like the clarification that we can, because I supported this when Elisa brought it up. So, because I think it is a good idea for us to know where we at. And I think it also, with the recruitment piece, we can talk about onboarding, what kind of support we are giving our new staff, right? So that, I think that would be a good piece as well.
Can I, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
As a part of the retention and retirement numbers, can we also get the reasons given in the resignation so we can kind of get a background?
I can't hear what you said, Gina. So
Oh, I was asking if we can get the reasons given for the retirement or the resignation so that we can kind of get a background.
Can I also make another request? Could I request then that we do the other 4? You know, if there's 5 and we want to understand where the district is on a particular priority, you know, I'd like to know where we're at on all of the priorities. And so I don't know, I still don't understand why we would single that one out. I understand that's someone's interest and that's great, but I'm also interested in the other one. So could we schedule 4 more work sessions to do the other 5? Whatever schedule makes sense, but
I actually think it's a great idea
Yeah.
to focus work sessions around the priorities.
okay.
I'm supportive of that.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
I think that'd be good. I think if we do that, when I was looking through the other priorities as I was looking at this, we tend to focus on 2 to 3 of them quite a bit. And there's a couple that we don't touch on, and this is one we haven't touched on very much. So maybe if we prioritized, for example, well, I'll let people think about that, but like, for example, the transparent financial planning and process, we haven't touched on that in a long time. I mean, I know I'm not on audit and budget, but one of the things I was thinking about the other day, you know, as we were looking at how we're spending some of the ESSER money and how we're doing some other things, there used to be this big book that Chris gave us that I like spreadsheets. So I would sit down and have a hot tea and get up early and read through that book. We haven't had that for a few years. So it's tough for me to think through from my perspective, in a way, the finances of the district are less clear than they have been in the past. And just thinking through how that is and how we can get access to that. Like I know we shifted over to Forecast 5 and I've seen some presentations from them about all the great things we can do there, but I don't actually have access to that, to look at that transparency. So that might be another one we could bring up relatively soon, because I think the other 3 we have had things about fairly recently, but I do support the idea of focusing on them as, instead of hit and miss, let's just talk about it as a priority, like how this covers everything. I mean, we tend to spend a lot of our time on priority 1, which is great because that's really where some focus should be, but going through the other ones as a work session setup would be great.
Ask a question of clarity to make sure that we get what's needed for the board. When we talk about reasons given for retirement and resignation, are we talking about that for all of the 5-year data set?
Well, I was wondering whether, as a personnel issue, whether that was something that we would even be able to.
I was just trying to think how I'd do that. It would probably be, you know, in a category and we could kind of graph it, not to get assigned single individuals to it. The thing is, I don't know how we're going to, if somebody who's retiring, what's the reason I'm retiring?
Right,
I mean, you know,
the retirement age.
so it may be difficult to get real reasons. You know, I'm tired. I qualify. I reached the rule of 88. You know, some of the reasons might be I always intended to retire when I turned 55. You know, so.
Well, and then it's also voluntary for people to provide that information, right? So people may
Yes.
not always provide it.
Exactly. They know. Sometimes they'll just say personal reasons or
Mhm.
moving.
Well, I think that's a really good point. So I would like to request that we don't make any assumptions about that data, about the number of retirements and resignations. Because there are several reasons, good or bad. So I don't want to make any assumptions at all about the data.
I know it sounds like I'm a killjoy here, but I guess I'm wondering what we would do with this data. I mean, are we moving to a district that would use it to then try to encourage people not to retire? Like I still just don't know what we do. So we're asking for a lot of labor and effort of the staff during a pandemic, right? With all the stuff that's going on. And I guess it feels like a really heavy ask, and I'm just still not clear on, like, so forget why we want it. What are we going to do with it?
I guess
So in any business where you're tracking employee movement, you have a target for turnover, right? And it's based on historical data, and it might be based on your particular industry. And so it's really composite to see, are we tracking like the expectation is? And I would think Kristen would know for schools what an average turnover rate is, whether it's resignations or whether it's retirements. And I think all we're trying to do, and it's your request, Elisa, so if I'm speaking incorrectly, is to see if we're on target for what's average in this industry. And so it shouldn't be that difficult to gather, because I would assume that you're gathering this data anyway, because it's always a data point that employers look at. Is that true? I mean,
So is that what we want to ask the work session to be about then? Because, so let's say so we've asked them to collect all this data. They're going to give it to us. We're going to look at it. I'm not going to know what any of it means because I'm not going to know the industry standard. I'm going to have to turn around and ask Kristen anyway. Do we just want her to tell us that? Or do we, like, I'm still not sure what the outcome of the work session is supposed to be.
I think maybe I am not believing that the entire work session would be around that, the question that I just asked. I was getting the discussion going when Sabrina said, let's talk about what that might look like. What is the information individuals would like? I believe that's one piece of it. And and you have also then shared another piece that you think would be interesting. And again, understanding priority 3. So I'm not anticipating the discussion would be solely around the data of resignations and retirements. What I'm believing this discussion is right now is for us to have a list of, hey, staff, we want to have a better understanding of how we're doing on priority 3. We've listed what I listed. You have now listed something. I listed again the teacher and leadership in terms of, so are there any other things that we want to add to that list to help the staff understand what we think it would be helpful at this point in understanding how we're doing on priority 3.
So then we would add the component that Director Lankaitis wants then as well, since that's a separate piece.
no, I'm not adding to it. You said it would be a big ask for them to gather this data. And I was simply saying that this is data that's typically tracked by employers maybe not the reasons is tracked, but certainly the numbers is tracked, usually. So I don't know how big it would be to gather just the numbers.
The numbers are available. We already have gathered that. So and I have it in a graph or spreadsheet already. The reasons, that's going to be difficult.
So then if we look at, there's the 3 aspects, there's the recruitment, retention, development. I think we talked about retention. I think Director Lankaitis's point, and to what Director Benkin said, you have that information, what do you do with it? The idea of comparing to any industry norms you might have available or something like that would be relevant to see how are we doing on that priority. I think we talked a little bit about development, the teaching learning grants. I know originally Ames was used as the model in the state for how they came up with that, as far as how it's meant to build teacher leaders and give experience. So just understanding how that's going, how that's been going. And I don't know how far back the data goes on that. Again, I think that's something that, because it's a grant, we probably have the data sitting somewhere because we had to fill it out. Recruitment, well, on development, one thing I was going to mention, this is actually one that might be a lot of data. So I'm completely fine. I'm just throwing it out there. The other thing I think about with teachers is not only helping them to gain leadership experience, but also professional development. You know, what type of professional development has been offered to teachers and how many teachers were taking that up. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but that's something staff could maybe think about and get back to us. You know, if we really want to look at how are we as a district developing our staff, it includes the professional development we're offering and those opportunities.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think something around that would be useful, but I don't know enough about that myself. I'm not an expert on that to know what would be the nugget that would give us some useful information. But, you know, to Christy and Jeff and Jenny, whatever you think might be useful information there.
And I think some of this is things that we probably would have had updates on in a more normal year. So maybe just trying to hit on what we can for this year before the school year draws to a close. So what I'm hearing in terms of requests, so we had the data around resignations and retirements for the past 5 years, and then along with that, data on recruitment and development. And I don't know that we have a specific ask, but whatever information that district staff think would be helpful or useful for the board to have around recruitment and development of staff. The one that it sounds like is maybe a time-consuming ask would be the reasons. Personally, my feeling is I don't know that we can get a lot from those because it's very voluntary what they do provide and typically short. So I don't know if
That's okay, you can take that one off.
is that okay, Director
Yeah,
Perez?
that's okay.
Okay.
I would like, though, if we could add to the data for retention and retirements, like a turnover rate. You know, like a percentage turnover rate of how many people leave versus like, how many total staff there are and how many leave, you know what I mean?
So it's basically like
Like
it's taking the number that is the sum of
Yep.
the resignations and retirement
So
just
what-
as a percentage.
Right, what
Yeah.
percentage of people leave?
Because that's really what you would compare to.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I would do in my industry to think
That's
about it.
that's what we do where I work, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if I want to add this or how we would add this. I'm trying to think of what's everything that's happened in the past 5 years. I still am not sure what month it is, right? But I'm thinking about COVID and how COVID has really transformed people's budgets and forced people to make their workforces smaller, right? And I feel like there was a time was it Chris, was there a time when we had a reversion? Maybe that was just a nightmare I had, right? Where we had to send money back. But I guess I'm thinking about the budget and how budgets force us to make staffing choices and decisions. And so I wonder if there is a way to account for that in the data that we will receive. So, you know, this particular year, the budget was shorter than it was or smaller than it was last year. I know we've had several budgets where there haven't been the cost of living increases, right? So, I mean, I guess I want to be able to account. I think looking at the numbers tells us one thing, but those numbers in many ways are a reflection of the financial environment in which we're operating. And so when we receive the data, if we could have any kind of relevant notes about the financial environment, I think that will help us be better able to consume the data.
And I think to
Chris, he's like, what?
To what Gina said, that might actually be the percentage in a way, because the way that the district's budget works, where it's locked to the number of students and the staff need to support those students, by looking at it less as the raw number of people that are changing from year to year, and instead looking at a percentage as related to the total number of staff, that should normalize the data such that it takes into account fluctuations in enrollment and in budget. But we need to see that. I mean, yeah, thinking out loud now, that's going to do it for teachers. Any adjustments that are being made, like at district office staff up and down, it's not going to handle that because that tends to ride through enrollment numbers. But yeah, I'm not going to make it overly complex. The percentage is probably a good way to think
Well,
about
I
it.
think the percentage takes into account the total amount of staff, so if people retire early and we don't necessarily fill those positions, it still takes that into account.
Yeah.
I guess I would also suggest that we need to look at retirements versus resignations and also age, because it could be somewhere back in some time ago, we have a particularly large number of teachers in a certain age range, right? And they all become eligible to retire at the same time, and they all decide to retire at the same time. So, I mean, if you look at just the pure number without knowing the rest of the picture, we may not actually have the real picture.
And I would say at the other end, at the younger end, we tend to have in this district turnover sometimes in our younger staff because they're here because their spouses are at Iowa State getting their graduate degree and they get a job somewhere else and they want to move with their spouse for some reason. So as far as the budget's concerned, I don't know that turnover is going to show. I can show you what our new money's been and what staff we've planned to add, but turnover is just kind of a natural thing. So if you're looking to see if there's more turnover than normal in 1 year, that's what the trend data would show you, but it's not going to be reflective because of the budget.
I think one thing that I would think about this, and towards Director Benkin's comment here at the beginning, we're kind of backing into this by talking about the data we want to see, when actually the real thing I think we probably want to talk about before that at the same time is what is the district's goal as far as it relates to recruitment, retention, and development of high quality staff? Like, what's the target? Because the data should show us, are we on that target? So like we're talking about the data as a way to see, are we close to industry average? Is that what our target is? And I think that's something, it's COVID year, so we haven't talked about this type of thing. I think it would be very interesting in the work session just to understand from the HR perspective and the district leadership perspective, how are we judging, are we achieving this priority? How are we judging whether we're meeting recruitment, retention, and development of high quality staff? And a completely legitimate thing to say in that work session is, we've given priority as a board to the other priorities, and we haven't really thought through how we want to do that, but maybe that becomes part of the work session is, how do we want to be monitoring this going forward to know as a measure of success? Because we're kind of doing it all at the same time because we're just getting into it. And I think that's fine. It might mean that it's a little bit messy, but that's reasonable too.
That's a good point. I'm just going to add on the piece on onboarding, because I'm thinking retention, once we have a brand new teacher and they're in our building, that immediately becomes a retention, right? Because we want to keep that amazing teacher that we got. So I would be interested to see what kind of support do we give, let's say, a first year teacher that goes into a first grade class, and do they have a mentor? What does that look for that teacher? And in the same way, what does it look like for a principal? We have a brand new principal. What kind of support is given to that principal?
Which that's part of the retention side too.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking. Immediately, once that person becomes an employee of our district, it is a retention because we got them because we want to keep them.
So to the discussion we had earlier, I think this work session is less about assessing how the district is doing and more about talking, where have we been, where are we now, and how are we thinking about this priority and knowing whether we're doing it well. So how are we succeeding on it going forward?
So would it be helpful? So you do have the priorities with the goals laid out. And that's what we were planning to report on, but that would not get at what is being talked about, because the goals that the board helped establish with the administrators, those are not what you're talking about, because the goals for priority 3 were staff engage in high quality professional learning as measured by implementation data. And the other one was, there was 3. The other one was by the end of 22 school year, demographics will represent a more diverse
population, and the third one was that will increase the percent of respondents who respond favorably, blah, blah, blah. I could go on, but you get points. So those would be the goals that we had laid out as a board and district admin.
I think what I'm saying, it's kind of, I don't want to preclude that we have the other discussion and see how we're doing. It's almost like, well, yeah, we're entering the summer soon, right? So this idea of having these work sessions about the priorities, we're going to be reassessing what our goals going forward are and the way we would measure those. So towards what President Shields Cook said, I think having a work session about each priority, and this is just the first one, is a good way to start thinking through that. Because yeah, we can look at what the district had said as goals thus far for that priority. We can also then look at some baseline information, have some base discussion, and then talk as a board about how do we see that moving forward? You know, what is it we see that as?
And I remember when we had the conversation around those goals, there were a couple of us who had asked questions about a goal around retention. And at the time, I believe there was new evaluation processes being implemented. And so there was some discussion about coming back to that after the new evaluation processes had been put in place. So maybe this would be a good time to start thinking about that moving forward too.
So not to belabor the point, I guess I still just don't know what we do with that, right? So let's say we have a work session. It's gonna be a long work session. I'm gonna bring one of those little pillows you sit on so your backside doesn't hurt. We can't, as a board, do anything about the results of that, right? And when we think about what the board is empowered to do, we can only impact that through the superintendent.
And
right?
through the goals, right?
Say it again?
So if we're through the goals. So if we're looking ahead to when in the fall we'll set our goals for the year, having the work sessions in advance of that can provide helpful information.
Okay, so that is helpful. That's what I feel like, that maybe I just didn't ask the right question. That was the information that I need. That was my first question. So what you're basically saying is you want to understand how we're performing on priority number 3 for the purpose of perhaps revising the priority in the future.
Or just the goals around that
Just the
priority.
goals,
Yeah.
just the goals. Okay,
Yes.
let me say it again. Let me say it again.
Director Benken, I think we just talked our way around to that.
Okay.
So you didn't miss anything.
No, but I just want to try to understand. I have to, you know my trains. I have to try to understand it. So we're going to have a work session where we will receive this information from the district for the purpose of understanding where we are on priority 3, so that we might in the fall revise the goals related to that priority.
I think that seems reasonable. And when we say in the fall, I think it's probably like the board retreat type stuff, like midsummer, which sadly thinking about it is like 4 meetings away.
It's really quick.
So, but yeah, I think that's kind of how we've circled around. Is that seems like a reasonable goal to your first question, because I know some of the information I was thinking about wanting to understand. Yes, truly, the goal of understanding that information would be then to see how we're going to go after this priority going forward and to set some goals as a district around it. So that seems like a very clear outcome that we would shoot for.
So then just let me try to, so I'm going to try to go back in time and try to understand, because the board sat down with the district. And I remember that meeting where they developed all these goals. So I remember thinking, what is all this? And they developed all these goals around the priorities. And what I felt like, and I can be wrong, what I felt like was they had a tiered system upon which they would meet those goals. There were short-term, intermediate, and long-term plans to kind of bring those goals into life, right? Because they weren't going to happen overnight. And so if we're operating on a set of priorities that's 2.5 years old, are we then saying, well, the district has had enough time to do all of those goals, let's move on to new goals? Are we thinking we might add more goals? Like, that's what I'm not understanding, because I feel like I'm struggling to remember, but I feel like the district presented kind of a more long-term plan, and I'm wondering about what it means for us to come in
maybe midstream and disrupt that progress by saying, now we're going to give you these whole new set of priorities or goals we want you to work on.
I would think that would probably be the thing we would talk about in the work session, where as a board, one of the things we are tasked with, right, is to review and kind of revisit and potentially change, potentially just reassure goals for the year as a way to guide the district. This is really then part of that process of the yearly revisit.
Because we do revisit these yearly, correct? I mean, I was
Yes, we
new,
do.
and it's just that with COVID this year, it was a little different.
Yeah, we did revisit them. It was
Yeah,
just,
It was just,
it was shorter.
Right,
Different.
right,
We
for
were
time,
on
time constraints and all of the,
Zoom.
yeah,
Yep.
different things that we had in front of us, so.
Thank you all. I understand. Thank you.
I guess the one thing I would add is I think maybe having this where a work session dedicated to each priority is probably a better way to think about those goals and the review of those goals. Because I, like you, Director Bankman, it was like, there was that meeting and here's the stuff that staff has worked on for months and put in front of me. And it's like, well, how do we respond to all 10 at once? You know, this puts it in, we can have much more concrete things that we talk through and we understand. And then it lays out really the board's work going forward, and there'd be progress reports throughout the year of how we're doing on those things. And we have more ownership of it probably too. So I like that idea.
Okay. So if that's good for everyone, then I think board leadership can get with Superintendent Reisner and staff and just kind of make sure that we have a understanding of what we're looking at. And if there's anything that's a concern in terms of time, we already talked sort of about the reasons for resignation, but if there's anything else, then we can revisit and come back together.
Sure.
Sound good? Okay. All right. Are there any comments from the public on our priority 3 discussion? Okay, then I will go ahead and open our public forum. And I just realized now that I did not read our statement on public comments earlier, so I will go ahead and read that now. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And if you are wishing to speak as part of our public forum, please press the raise your hand button in Zoom and you'll be given permission to speak. Okay, we do not have any hand. Oh, we do have a hand raised. Okay, I'm glad I gave good wait time. Eve Lederhouse, you've been given permission to speak.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't ring in earlier. My name is Eve Lederhouse, 1531 Linden Drive. And I just want to say that I applaud the request for this past data to find out why different staff members have been leaving. I think it's a wise move. It's only fair to look at that and to evaluate what's been happening. I think 5 years is a good range, and I look forward to hearing what your assessment or non-assessment is of the data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eve. Is there anyone else who would like the opportunity to speak? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and close our public forum.
President Shields Cook?
Yeah.
Before we move on, I guess so this feels a little awkward because the caller just said that they were really looking forward, they were applauding us for looking at why people are leaving. But I think we just specifically said we weren't going to be doing that. And so I guess I want the public to understand what we're doing so that there aren't misunderstandings. Did I misunderstand? 'Cause
No,
I thought,
I just am wondering, are we supposed to comment on?
no, I'm not asking for a comment on that. I'm asking for clarity on what we just agreed to, because I felt like we actually just agreed we were not going to be looking at why people were leaving. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct, yes.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so moving on to our consent agenda, I will entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I'm sorry, who said second? Okay. Now I don't have my Zoom screen in front of me. It's harder to tell. Okay. Moved by Perez, seconded by Bankin, and Superintendent Reisner.
Thank you. Gifts to the district. Lene Big, ISU Social Activities Committee of the Office of Sponsored Programs Administration and Collegiate United Methodist Church and Wesley Foundation.
Thank you. It was moved by Perez, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Passes 6-1. Moving on to our action items. Our first action item is our 2020-2021 proposed budget amendment.
Good evening.
I'm
I
sorry, can I have a
move
motion?
the
Oh, I'm
board
sorry.
order the board secretary to publish the proposed budget amendment and to set the date and time of the public hearing for May 17, 2021 at 6:30 PM.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, there was this awkward silence that I felt I needed to fill. So Eric, if you could pull up the budget publication, I think it's the second attachment there. So each year, as you know, if we are going to need to amend our budget, we need to do it before May 31st, or I should say adopt it and file it with the county auditor before May 31st. There are 4 different control areas: instruction, support services, non-instructional, and other. The main reason we need to amend the budget is the other category, but I am recommending a $500,000 increase to instruction and support services as well, due to the COVID expenditures that we've had this year and the ESSER funding, just to give us a little bit of wiggle room there. The main amendment is to the other category, which includes debt service and construction. And I'm recommending $25 million increase there. If you recall, we refunded our 2015 revenue bonds in the fall. And when that happens, the revenue comes in as revenue, and the payment off of the old bill or old bonds goes out as an expenditure. It's just really a bookkeeping thing. I don't actually exchange money. But that $10 million that we refunded did come through as an expenditure that was not originally budgeted, because we did budgeted when we did the FY21 budget, because we didn't know we were going to refund those bonds. The remaining is due to just construction timing. If you recall, the high school got off to a little bit later start than what we originally had planned, and I had more originally budgeted in FY20 that moved to FY21. So, and because our construction season crosses the summer, we just need to amend for that as well.
So Chris, your comment on, so I understand the other then, but in terms of the instruction, 500,000 and the student support services, 500,000, you're believing those, you're providing that cushion because those are increased expenses from COVID that we've utilized ESSER money for.
Right. If you recall, originally they were in that 0019, but
Yep.
once we received the higher amount of ESSERs, we moved everything to those ESSER funds. But yes, it's we have to have budget authority to spend grant money. Just like, even though we didn't actually exchange money with the revenue bonds, we still have to have the budget authority to pay off those 2015 bonds. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of getting the paperwork in order.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, it was moved by Limkitis, seconded by Perez. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Master contract between Public Professional and Maintenance Employees Local 2003 International Union of Painted and Allied Trades and Board of Education Year 2 of 2020-2022 Master Contract Wage Reopener.
I move the board approve the wage reopener agreement between PPME Local 2003 IUPAT and the Ames Board of Education.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Colton. Discussion?
The union has already ratified the agreement, so this is the last step.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board. We have a couple that are listed on here. We will start with the teacher appreciation. And I'm not sure which, Director Beerbaum, you want to give the update on that?
Sure, I didn't watch the agenda to see I was going to. The update is we took like 60 donuts to Edwards this morning and I did not eat any of them. But the teachers very much enjoyed seeing us, and we now have a scheduled visit with every school where anywhere from 2 to 3 board members will be at the schools this week to basically just say hello to the teachers, that we appreciate what they've been doing, and to say hi. Also, so the community knows, I mean, I know the board knows, board members also sent some emails to the teachers today, or they have, thanking them and appreciating them for this year especially, and just for all the things they do for us. So to any teachers watching, thank you. We definitely appreciate everything you've done this year.
Thank you. And I'm going to go through the request for staff, and then I'll ask if there are any other items from the board. But the request from staff, I think, is just around that work session, which we have some compiling to do. So I won't go through all of that right now, but we will do that separately. Other items from the board?
Could I just clarify?
Yeah.
Were we going to do just that work session, or were we going to set the dates and do all the priorities?
I don't know that we clarified that.
Okay, maybe I might have missed it.
No, I don't think I think there was maybe, yeah, we definitely would like to do all of them. I don't know if we have a specific timeline for that people had in mind, or.
I don't have a timeline in mind. My initial thought when hearing that is, I almost would like to do one and see how it goes. You know, see if we think this is a good idea before we try to commit everybody to what we'll do the rest of them. But I think that should be a tentative plan.
What was it?
So it'll be a tentative plan.
Okay.
But we'll see how the first one goes and then go from there.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. Jeff
M-
wants, Dr.
May I ask, is this appropriate? Based on our description of what we talked about for the review of SIAC, is it the intention that that is also a work session or not?
Well, I think what Jeff might be getting at is the review of SIAC could actually be our priority 1 discussion.
I was just going to say that might just be folded into.
Is that what you were getting at?
That is a really smart interpretation of my question. I just thought that based on what we described doing with the board to review SIAC felt like a work session to me. So I just wanted clarity before we left today.
When we were talking about that, and I think I might have been the one that proposed that, I was actually thinking of it more as an information item, because it seems very much like you're presenting the information, putting it forward. Now, if we wanted to rope it into a priority 1 type discussion, then that seems like more of a work session. But for the purposes of 2 weeks from now, I'd be okay with an information item, but I'm open to the rest of the board having different thoughts. But
I
given
just
what
was
we saw-
interested in the reading data and seeing that data that was reported. So.
Same. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not trying to create work for any of us. I just wanted to make sure I was preparing in a way that met the needs of the board.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I had not captured that in my notes. So. Any other items from the board? Okay, items from the superintendent.
Well, now I'm going to confuse things because I had on here to talk about strategic planning process. And really that strategic plan becomes kind of the grounding document for the district in how we move forward with implementation and monitoring of priorities and goals. And it would be a more systematic approach to it, where you would set your long-term, short-term goals. And I just really think moving forward, it's important for the district to have that strategic plan in place. And I think it will help with some of the confusion around, different timing of goals and actions. And it would give us really that foundation for a 5-year long-term plan where we have consistent reporting and it's very well known. But when you choose a strategic plan, there's different types. And so what I had hoped for, because it really is about involving stakeholders. So I think it's important for the board to maybe hear some different approaches and then select one that they believe would be best for the district. And so what I was hoping to do is maybe with our team, narrow it down to a couple, and then there's a couple common ones in education. So really use our districts. Can you hear me okay, Lisa?
Yep, just use your mic.
Okay, sorry about that. Use our district team and narrow those down, and then bring back to the board a couple presentations of different types, and then have the board select which consultant they would go with for the strategic plan. And that plan usually takes about a year to develop. There's a lot of stakeholder groups that you pull in, and it takes kind of that outside person to coordinate that in conjunction with our community and our district. So with your permission, I would just be asking to bring forward a couple different presentations. We'll have them come and present, and then with the final kind of step being the board select one.
I just have a clarifying question. What stage, if we could put it in like stage 1, stage 2, what stage are we with the strategic planning? Because I thought we were already working with an institute regarding the equity. Where did that go? Are we not doing that?
Yeah, the equity strategic planning, and Dr. Jones, I don't know if you want to speak to this, or I can, either way. But it's not, when it was a new process through the Equity Institute. And when we dug into it, we realized it wasn't going to be comprehensive enough. And so it didn't have all of the components, but we will have some of those strategies embedded. So some of those goals, I guess I wouldn't call them goals, some of those items that were worked on, they would be included in this. So it would be a piece of informing this, but this would be more long-term.
So that the work with that particular institute, it's done. We're not.
No, we still work with them.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still working with them. Actually, we are still meeting with one of the representatives from within the equity office because that particular strategic plan is centering equity. The term that they're using is equity-oriented strategic plan. And for the equity office, it helps us guide the strategic plan for the district a little better. And so we have an MOU, memorandum of agreement with them still, and it ends at the end of this term. So we are continuing with that relationship with them.
So what they would be working with that piece is that it's like an equity comprehensive plan?
Yes.
And okay, but these are working in tandem.
Yes.
Basically.
And your driving kind of strategic plan is much broader. And so that would be a piece of it. The equity plan would be a piece of this bigger picture.
Okay, so if I can put it in my brain as in stages, for the equity piece, we're perhaps a little farther along than the strategic plan. So it could be stage 1 and stage 2-ish.
Two-ish.
Two-ish. Two-ish is
We'll
good.
go with that, yeah. But I-
2.5.
yeah. But again, it helps me to be able to develop some communication from the equity office. And again, that was the intent from the original relationship with the Midwest Equity Institute. And so for our office, we're continuing with that conversation until the agreement is completed. But again, it's helping us have a better understanding of how to communicate the purpose and the priorities from the equity office, which is aligned to the district strategic plan. So we'll be able to speak to that a lot better with the guidance of the Midwest Equity Institute.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Superintendent Reisner, if people already answered any of these questions, I apologize. I'm having trouble hearing. What you mentioned that these are different types of strategic plans in the educational arena. And do they, as part of the goals, do they establish measures? Like how do we
Yes.
measure success, and then what data?
Yes.
What do we need? So it will really help us evaluate success
Yes.
of our goals with these strategic plans, because we'll actually have measures that we can see. Are we improving? Do we need to still improve? Are we improving at the rate we want to improve? Which is really the kind of strategic plans I've worked on, and
Yes.
it really helps guide.
Yep.
Right. So, okay.
It's kind of that bus that you get on and you drive forward in it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So then we're not creating data. I mean, so we've pretty much established what data we're going to be collecting.
Yes.
To support our growth or lack of growth or.
Yep.
Okay.
And what you'll be reviewing and when you'll review it.
Yeah.
And so it saves a lot of kind of that.
These discussions like we
yep.
had tonight. Yeah.
Yep. I'm done. Can I, okay, I didn't know if I was given wait time. I wasn't sure. Okay, so the second item I had was board equity learning. Dr. Jones, I think is really anxious to get to work with the board on some of the equity, the critical consciousness work. And so we thought it might be good to bring it to the board to talk through. Is this something that the board would like to move forward with in doing some equity training or really critical consciousness work? And if so, how do you prefer? And so the two kind of, maybe there's more than two choices, but the choices that we talked about, we do about a 20 to 25 minute once a week with all of our district directors and principals, where we do kind of an equity learning activity. We could do something like that at each board meeting or once a month, or we could do it through a work session where we have a longer chunk of time and maybe cover a little bit more at one time. So we're just throwing it out there right now. Dr. Jones, I don't know if you have anything to add. Okay.
I guess I'll clarify. The term that we use is an inclusion activity. And so we've modeled that before during one of the work sessions of some of the learning where we implement critical consciousness. And it's just a way for us to ground our thinking as we're having conversations and as we're making decisions as educators and leaders in the district. So we just kind of wanted to bring that to the board as well in order to have that conversation around equity.
I just want to add that I would be in favor, and I'll tell you why. So my husband and I have taken advantage of the training that Dr. Jones and Jessica Sidler have made available to the community. And, you know, those trainings are fantastic. I love them. They're just so amazing. And it's so wonderful to have and engage in that learning with members of the community. But, you know, we're having it at the administration, we're having it in the buildings, we're having it with the students, and now we're having it with the community, and the board is literally left out of the conversation, right? And so I just feel like for me, it's a of course, it would just be natural that we would be engaging in this in whatever way I would think you think makes the most sense is what I would prefer. But I mean, for me, I'm like an absolute yes. It just, we can't be left out of this conversation.
I could tell you the benefit of having the inclusion activity component is exactly what Dr. Jones said, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I had forgotten. It really does ground your discussions, and so whatever we do as an admin team, district and our district and our principals and assistant principals, it's that foundation. We lay it at the very beginning, and then it centers our work around critical consciousness in the lens that we bring to whatever the topics are. So that it is a really great way to do it. You can do it in about 20 minutes, I think.
Well, I'm in favor of both. I can see, I would really like to have a longer, more in-depth training. And I think then the way that you keep that grounding is by having this, like you said, the inclusion activities. So having the longer training, I think would be really helpful for the board. And then having the inclusion activities monthly as well, I think would be great to kind of keep us focused on that.
I like that idea as well, because I know there were two of you that didn't have that training from before. So I think it would be really good for everybody.
So one thing I would say, and this is me, right? I'm going to show my academic side. I find that things that I want to actually learn a lot about, one work session doesn't quite get there. And one disadvantage we have as a board is we meet 1 to 2 times a month. So I think a third thing I might propose is if we were to have a work session or have the activities, which I think are great, to additionally have something outside of when we're meeting, like some sort of, I always go to like a book, but some sort of references or articles or something so that we can have independent learning about it so that it doesn't take so long to get through the type of, I'll use the word curriculum, but that's not quite right. But the content that we'd like to be able to see. I think for me individually, that would help. I don't know about other people.
I think, so how to say this, as one of the people of color in this table, I ran because I wanted to give people access to better education, like marginalized communities. I think I was naive to think that I would just like fit right in, that I would just come in and I would just live in this world like just like any other board member. I don't. And so when we talk about equity and we talk about critical consciousness, it is, I think we also have to work as a board. What does that look like for someone like me that sounds like me, that English is a second language? I think it's a bit of an elephant in the room for me personally, that we talk about this critical consciousness equity when I want more people like me to run for these positions, not just school board, but city governor. I want representation, and I feel like representation matters. So I feel like we should also, when we work with equity and critical consciousness, to realize what our board looks like, and perhaps that we also need some sort of internal work, how we function as a board.
Thank you for all of those thoughts and for sharing your perspectives. I don't know if we give a whole lot of direction, but I think the answer is yes, as much as we can and whenever we can. So.
All right, and then finally, were we ready to move on? Thank you. Okay, I wanted to just It is not on the agenda because this topic came after the agenda was published. So we have received, I know the board has received a number of concerns from parents of high school students or community members regarding some incidents that occurred in the high school the last few weeks. And so we worked as a team last week on how we would respond to that. And we definitely responded to it with a sense of urgency. We put 2 additional district office staff people who are high school focused and trained, and we put those staff members in the in the high school to provide additional supervision and really targeted supervision. So not that kind of passive role of you might be high-fiving kids in the hall. This was really intentional. And so we broke down where were these incidents occurring and how could we ensure that those areas were covered at all times. And so I feel really good about that safety component that we currently have in place since we put those measures in place, along with making a few other shifts. We have not had any incidents since. I did ask Dr. Nyberg if she would come and update the board, or not come and update the board, but zoom in and update the board on this. Because I think you would be really impressed with the work that she has done with the district admin team and her own admin team. And I feel like, there's sometimes we don't give a great response. We really have taken a deep look at and given a very good response to. And so I asked her if she would come, and I can't remember how we get her in, but I think you might be able to. She'll come in as a participant. But one of the things as she's coming on that I wanted to remind the board, we can't talk about specific students or specific disciplinary actions against students. And so just as a reminder, we can't talk about that with staff and we can't talk about that with students, but I think she can give some great information for you as a board in how we are approaching this and what we know today.
Thank you, Superintendent Reisner. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So like Superintendent Reisner indicated, we've had a few incidents over the last couple of weeks. It's mostly 2 specific situations. The first situation involved a core group of students, and they had multiple interactions over 3 days, 2 at school, 1 in the community. Disciplinary action was implemented with those students and safety plans were made. With the second incident, which was separate from the first, it was based on social media. We continue to investigate and learn more about the intricacies of that situation and the relationships between students. Again, we took disciplinary action and are implementing safety plans as we speak. In the immediate, we have identified, as Superintendent Reisner mentioned, we have identified particularly when these incidents tend to occur. And as she indicated, have added additional staff with a focus on providing supervision and interaction with students who might be passing in the hallways. We're also looking at some, we have some structural changes. One is upcoming in the next week or so regarding our lunches and kind of where those are. And then long-term plans will include some additional professional development and some additional structures, specifically with processes and procedures for staff and students, so that we're in clear communication and lockstep in our more focus on those pillars to support that PBIS. It's not typically called PBIS at the secondary level, but a way to describe and understand behaviors, understand what's motivating them, and get students the interventions and supports they need.
Thank you, Dr. Nyberg. We also sent out a letter to parents tonight, just acknowledging that we were aware that there were a couple of incidents that occurred. Definitely not the behavior that we want, and again took action to make sure that we had some safety measures in place and address those concerns. And I don't know, Chris, I can't remember, and Elisa, this might have been when you were president, but can we discuss it if it's not listed?
No.
Okay, darn it. Okay. But if
Yeah,
you
no,
have.
yeah, we can't if it's not on it. Mhm.
Yeah, so if you have specific questions for me, feel free to email us and we can work to get you those answers. So email Dr. Nyberg, and she probably has more of the specifics as they're being developed. But if you could copy myself and Dr. Hawkins, that would be great.
Okay. Our next item is our board planning calendar. And we will have our next meeting on May 17th, or next regular meeting on May 17th. Is there anything else we need to cover on the board planning calendar? Okay. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Perez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.